Public concerns are mounting as South Korea's healthcare looks at a potential halt in services, while security concerns also remain in place as North Korea resumes its ballistic missile testing. So what are professors of medicine demanding? What has been the government's response? And what is the latest regarding Pyongyang's most recent missile launch? Hello and welcome to Issues and Insiders. I'm Min Sun-hee. It's Tuesday here in Korea, and today we have our foreign correspondents with their take on headlines here and elsewhere. I have Thomas Maresca here in the studio. Thomas, welcome back.
Thanks, great to be here.
I also have Celio Fioretti with us. Celio, it's good to see you again.
Thank you, glad to be here.
Right, Thomas, let's begin with the latest developments surrounding the standoff between medical practitioners and government authorities here.
Right, well, still at an impasse, basically. Still around 12,000 junior doctors have been, off the job for the past month or so in a protest over a quota enlargement for medical school proposal that the government has, is going to push forward. The one little thing we saw is yesterday we saw the first formal action towards some punitive measures being taken by the government. They are going to officially suspend the licenses of two doctors who are senior doctors, part of the Korea Medical Association, the trade organization. That's the doctors have told the media that it will start in April 15th for a 3-month suspension. I don't think the health ministry has officially acknowledged it. So, that's the first little thing we've seen. The government has been threatening to, suspend the licenses of the walked out doctors, and even threatened to take criminal proceedings against some of the members of the Korea Medical Association that they accuse of kind of inciting this walkout. And so, but at the same time, the government doesn't look to be moving off of this number of, the increase of 2,000 seats in the medical schools next year. They've mentioned some, willing to talk about some other concerns that the medical industry has, but that sort of core issue about the quota, they show no indication of really moving off. And the one thing that people are keeping an eye on is that medical professors now from 16 universities have said that they're going to walk out starting March 25th or submit mass resignation. So that is a heavy concern, obviously.
Right, that is next Monday. Celio, for the sake of our viewers who may not be aware of the saga over healthcare here in Korea, could you walk us through the government side of this story?
Yeah, of course, the government has been very clear since the beginning on that matter. The increase of 2,000 medical students from next year is for them the only solution to the crisis of the shortage of doctors in Korea. As we have seen, doctors have protested. They also did it before against a similar reform pushed by former President Moon Jae-in to increase the quota of medical students. But this time the government does not want to give it up. They really have a strong position on that. And you can understand them. They have the public support. People in Korea massively reject the doctors' protest. So they have the argument to play that waiting game. After the doctor walked out, the government issued a return to work order. The doctor still kept the protest ongoing, so they decided to put up sanctions to suspend the medical license. While the doctors, as my colleague said, are refusing to negotiate, the government showed a hand toward negotiation, except on the core principle of the reform, the increase of the medical students. So I don't think we can see any negotiation in the weeks coming.
Right, and this is, of course, to increase the number of seats available to 5,000 by raising by 2,000, because it currently stands at more than 3,000, so giving seats of about more than 5,000 starting next year. Thomas, could you tell us a bit more about the medical sector side of the story now?
Yes, well, as pertains to the quota issue, they're arguing that medical schools are not equipped to have this big influx of students, and it will affect the quality of the training and the quality of the outcomes after that. But I think their bigger argument, which is a little bit obscured in this quota number, is that they're saying this just increasing the number of medical students is not going to have the desired effect to answer the problems that the government is doing this quota for in the first place, which is to increase the number of doctors in rural areas and in essential medicine fields such as emergency medicine, pediatrics. That's really the argument mostly for why the government is doing this. And they're saying that, the structural issues are not going to change if you just throw more doctors into the mix because, the way the insurance system is structured, a lot of essential services have this very strict price cap on them. So the doctors themselves who go into those fields earn less, and the hospitals have a hard time making money on these services, and they end up sort of cutting costs. The workload is really high, and it almost, I've heard residents say, to me that it incentivizes you to go into these more lucrative fields that are less strictly regulated, like dermatology, cosmetic surgery. And they also argue that a lot of that cost savings and workload savings or workload shortage is offloaded to these trainee doctors, the ones who are on the walkout. And in some of these top medical teaching hospitals, something like 30 to 40% of the doctors are trainees there, and they're covering a lot of the emergency shifts and helping with the surgeries, and their conditions are extremely tough. It's something like they work 80, 90-hour weeks. They have 36-hour shifts sometimes. Their pay is extremely low. I mean, the high-paid doctors do well, but these trainees are getting like $3,000 a month. And so it's kind of part of this whole systemic issue that they're saying just adding more doctors is just going to not improve it. It'll just maybe push more to these still desirable fields. And they have a couple other issues about medical malpractice. They're very vulnerable to getting sued, and they can even be held like criminally liable, which is kind of more unique, I think, to South Korea. And I guess their final argument is that this is also, they see it as very politically motivated, timed to this upcoming National Assembly election. And as Celio mentioned, the government is definitely winning the argument of public opinion about this. But, I think the doctors, the medical community, they do have arguments that are probably worth addressing, but it's a little bit obscured under this number of the quota.
Right, and very briefly speaking, Celio, what can you tell us about the workload faced by doctors here, as compared perhaps to the workload faced by doctors over in France?
Oh, yeah, I mean, in Korea, doctors work way more than what we have in France, but still, in France, we have also a similar crisis faced by the public hospital. So the big difference in France is that most of the hospitals are public, and there the doctors work around maybe 60 hours a week, so a bit less than what the Korean doctors do, but still way more than the average. In 2022, the French court, the Conseil d'État, issued a warning against the government for the poor management of the doctors' workload. They pointed out that they are working too much for the amount they are paid. Due to lack of public funding, the number of doctors is quite low compared to the needs of the French hospital. So they have smaller teams and the same amount of patients. So this is very critical and has been going on for decades in France. So that's a big issue, but you can see both of our countries face a medical crisis of a different nature because our systems are different. But there's still a lot of issue to address on the workload of doctors in France too.
Right, so it's a concern in France as well. Moving from the concerns on the healthcare front to those with regard to security, Thomas, North Korea launched several short-range ballistic missiles early Monday morning. What is the latest on that front?
So Monday, the Japanese and South Korean military announced that they had detected the launch of multiple short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea. Today, as is usually the case, the North Korean media, KCNA, reported on what had happened the day before, and they said it was that Kim Jong-un was overseeing the launch of a multiple rocket launcher system of massive 600 millimeter rockets, which they kind of blur the distinction between rockets and ballistic missiles, but they have this range of around 350 kilometers or so. And so that's apparently what they were testing yesterday. It's the first ballistic missile launch since January, first sort of missile launch since last month when North Korea has been launching a lot of cruise missiles. And, you know, some have questioned the timing. Is it a message? U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Seoul for the Democracy Summit. The U.S. and South Korean joint military exercises just ended last week, and Pyongyang usually has something to say about that. So, you know, if there's a message to it, that might be part of it. But, you know, it also just kind of falls into this sequence of of North Korea, just really kind of ramping up or keeping up this hostile rhetoric. And, you know, they've done a number of weapons tests. I mean, one little interesting side of it is that, you know, it seems this year in particular, they've really been focusing on more short-range missiles, artillery tests. You know, they've been doing drills that have been kind of, you know, as well as the language that Kim Jong-un and others have used is kind of focusing more on their threat to South Korea and posing, you know, framing South Korea as their principal enemy. And so, you know, this is kind of falling in that sequence of, you know, their focus here. But I was I think we both were there at a briefing with the defense minister, Shin Won-sik, yesterday. And he raised he sort of raised it speculatively, but he was talking about the Russia-North Korea connection, you know, and their arms sort of trade. And he was saying that, you know, it might be that North Korea is testing these types of shorter range missiles and artillery for, you know, for export to Russia. I mean, we know they've already been supplying them munitions as well as missiles. So these might be the kinds of things that Russia could use on the battlefield in Ukraine. So that's another possibility as to what North Korea is up to.
Right, and that, of course, was raised by Defense Minister Shin Won-sik. Expanding on something that Thomas touched upon earlier, Celio, there are many pundits who, like Thomas, believe that this timing of the ballistic missile test on Monday was strategically timed to coincide with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit here to South Korea for the Summit for Democracy. What's your take on this?
Well, of course, Antony Blinken was here and still here for the Summit for Democracy in Seoul. Yesterday, the Joint Chief of Staff called the launch a blatant provocation that severely threatened the peace on the peninsula. Pyongyang typically in the recent missile launch called it a normal activities that have nothing to do with the regional context. So we can have some question about the real intent of North Korea with this missile launch. Yesterday, Minister Shin Won-sik at the press conference said about the launch, it's difficult. Obviously, we cannot be in the head of Kim Jong-un, so we cannot really know what's going on. But he personally said that he doesn't believe it has any sort of relation with the visit of Antony Blinken in Seoul. For the last weeks, the Freedom Shield exercise was going on, and North Korea didn't have the really big missile launch with the intercontinental ICBM, as we usually see, and some people expected one. As my colleague said, it's focusing most on short-range missile, artillery shells, maybe for the Russian exports. That's the question, but really, Minister Shin Won-sik yesterday emphasized on probably not related to Antony Blinken.
Right. Thomas, I believe last week you covered quite extensively North Korea's new battle tank and Kim Jong-un's test drive of that tank. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Right. Well, it's just, you know, it's kind of another in the sequence of Kim Jong-un visiting a site and overseeing or guiding you know, a test or a launch or something. And this was a combat training exercise with tanks that, you know, he declared were the most powerful in the world, but I don't think we, you know that much about them specifically. Again, the rhetoric was in line with this sort of, you know, focus on war preparations regarding the South, and he even actually mentioned that the tank unit that won this combat training was the same one that had occupied Seoul during the Korean War. And, you know, the week before he had visited an artillery firing training, and that also was really kind of specifically pointing out that these have the range to strike, you know, Seoul, and these are going to be the ones on the front line. So it's a little bit in the context of all that. I mean, but to point again back to something the defense minister said yesterday was, he noted that the number of trainings that North Korea has been conducting with troops and, you know, material has gone up significantly in January and February after being a lot lower in the preceding months, and he said it was mainly because of a lack of fuel that they were not doing these trainings. And so he didn't also say it outright, but it was in the context of the back and forth exchange between North Korea and Russia. What is North Korea getting back from Russia? And he had mentioned food. A lot of it is food and a lot of it is raw materials. But he was also kind of speculating that Russia may be finding a way to supply fuel to North Korea, which is banned under UN sanctions, but the North has always sort of found ways to circumvent that. So that could be another sign of how this relationship is developing with Russia.
Right. And Celio, I believe we have time for a very brief response to this final question, perhaps. Celio, what are your thoughts with regard to the tough rhetoric shared between Seoul and Pyongyang in recent times?
Yes, since the beginning of the year in January, the tension really went up. Kim Jong-un has called for war preparation, and President Yoon Suk-yeol called for a 100-fold answer response to any provocation. It might be risky to go that path. Soon is the crab season in the Yellow Sea, and it's a time where usually North Korean ships and South Korean ships, fishing ships, goes close to each other. And there always have been some minor incidents, but with this heightened tension now and this idea of answering strong and fast on any provocation, we could see a potential accident on the sea. So I think South Koreans have to be also very careful about this. We don't know the intents of Kim Jong-un for this year with the election coming in Korea, in the US. So it's going to be risky, and we have to be careful about that.
Right, for sure. So caution has been taken by both sides then. Yeah. All right, Celio, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Much.
Thomas, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for Tuesday's edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching.